All right, welcome everyone. We've had quite a weather day if you're in Rexburg. I don't know how many, how much rain we got, but we got a lot. And a tornado watch, and anyway, I actually still have a home in Rexburg, so I had to go see if it was not flooding, and thankfully it wasn't, but it was close. But today, this is, I think, kind of one of my favorite lessons, because when we talk about the name of this class, Principles of Personal Achievement, we're really talking about doing better in the way that we live. And this is kind of the midpoint of your personal creed document. Not quite, you have 4 parts to go, you've done 3. But if you practice what we're going to talk about today, it can help us live and do and be better. And I'll hopefully explain that in a way that will make a little bit of sense. But we're going to combine today balance, expectation, and the law of 1%. Let's talk a little bit about balance. Now, balance is interesting because in the book there's a law, but it doesn't really indicate or talk about an art. But I want to talk a little bit about a principle called the golden mean. This is from Aristotle, and Aristotle lived sometime before Christ, hundreds of years before Christ, but he was one of the great philosophers, and he's talked that you could almost put anything on a continuum, left to right, and I'm not sure if I'll try and make this so you guys can see it. Well, maybe that'll not work. Maybe that will. So here's an example. If you were to take some ancient, old history army, I picture, some army on one side of the field and the other on the other. They got spears and swords and bows and arrows. But through some method, you could probably pick the soldier that is the most courageous, the absolute bravest of the bunch. I'm going to open up my chat window so I can have you guys talk to me that way or the other way. So what happens to the soldier who's the most brave? The absolute bravest soldier. Tell me what, good, bad, how does it work out for him? Anybody? Very likely to die. Thank you, Joshua. That is exactly true. Okay. He might be inspiring, but he's going to march across the field, be the first there, and he's going to take on the biggest, baddest of the 3 others or whoever's there. And courage out of control could be reckless, and he's likely going to die. All right. On the other side of the spectrum, you could find the soldier who's the most afraid, the most cautious. What happens to that soldier? Anybody? Someone be brave and help me out here. Or type something in. The most afraid. Is he going to live through the day? Yeah. Ronnie says he will get teased. Yes. He might even get beat up, depending on how hard the general or captain or whatever is. He might even end up being killed by his side, right? And Camille, I think, states it perfect. Likely to live, but won't be a lot of help. Well, in the middle, you could have somebody that is the perfect blend of courage and caution. And what Aristotle taught is that we have this golden mean, that we want to be in this range of having enough courage to go fight, but enough caution to be careful. And you can do this with all sorts of different, virtues or character traits. And this week you're invited, it's not part of any grade, but to read a talk by Elder Oaks that talks about how your strengths can become your downfall. He talks about some people like to be led by, some people have the gift of being led by the Spirit, but if it's too far to an extreme, they might feel like they need to be led by the Spirit in everything. And so this week we're talking about how balance can help us in these core dimensions. And it's spending a little time with the law of 1% and asking ourselves, how am I doing spiritually, physically, educationally, socially, with my family? And sometimes we can be a little out of balance because, maybe it's finals week and you just have to spend more time on your education and might neglect your family or your social. Sometimes your physical part of your life might be suffering. You might be ill. And so you're not, you got to work hard on getting better. But we can keep, in the book, it talks about keeping these plates spinning. And if we pay attention to our values, the things that matter, we'll do a better job of keeping those plates spinning. So let's talk now about expectation and what you're going to do with this next part of your creed document. So here's a quiz. I have 6 children, 5 living. This picture was taken maybe 10 years ago. So my children are older now. This is in my backyard in my Rexburg house, and we've made a pile of these. I thought, it's a good picture opportunity. But one of these kids was missing. So I took the picture of 4 of the kids, and then I went and grabbed the other kid, threw that person on the leaf pile, took a picture, and then I had to Photoshop one of them in. So this is the just for fun quiz. Which of these kids is Photoshopped into the picture? Any guesses? You could say, blue hat, older girl, black shirt, orange shirt, little girl. Who is Photoshopped? You guys are all staring intently. Black shirt. Black shirt. 2 guesses, black shirt. Any more? 3 for black shirt. Actually, that one looks the most Photoshopped, but he wasn't the one Photoshopped. So my adopted son, Isaac, the little one in the front in the orange shirt, was the one that I Photoshopped in. But next week, you're going to start building personal creed document number 4 on values. And I've already alluded to the fact that this is, I think, the centerpiece to your creed document. And it has the potential of helping you live more progressively. So what you're going to be creating is several value statements. There's no set limit. I wouldn't do too many. I recommend 6 or 7. And then you're going to make a statement like this. So one of my value statements in my personal creed document is that I am a good father. I value being a dad. It's one of the most important parts of my existence. And then what you're going to create beneath your value, and you've already started doing this. Last couple of weeks, you started making a list of values and thinking about conference talks and talking about things that are important. Next week, we're going to spend even more time, and we're going to narrow it down to what really matters most. So what you're going to do then is you're going to make a list of affirmation statements that support the value statement. So my value statement is, and I make a little preamble why I get up each day. I'm the best father I can be. My value is being a dad, a father. And then these are my affirmation statements. I am a good example. I play with my kids. I teach rather than criticize. I recognize and praise all good deeds. I support my kids in their activities, and I respect and support their friends. Okay. Now I want to go back last week to talk about positive self-talk, positive vision, and proactive operating process, those 3 things, and the law of 1%. If I spend a few minutes each day with a value, and some people maybe even regiment it out and say, okay, I'm going to have 7 values, and Sunday is my disciple value, and Monday's my family value, and Tuesday's my health value, and Wednesday's but you regularly spend time with this statement, and you repeat it, and this is very psycho-cybernetic-esque. You repeat it, and you ask yourself, how am I doing with this part of my life? Am I a good example? Do I play with my kids? Do I teach them? Do I recognize them? Do I support them? And do I respect them and their friends? Okay. And then what happens is we apply that with the law of 1% time. It's top of mind. It's important to us. We're remembering it. And just the fact that we're living with it a little bit each day means that when life happens, and that's what happens with these two younger kids of mine. This is old. I need to update these pictures. I could come up with a really good updated picture of these two that I have at home now. When I took these pictures, the right one, Isaac, was probably 4 and Emery was 2. The left one, Isaac, was probably 5 and Emery was 3. Well, they're kids, and they get into trouble, and they make messes, and they write on walls, and they break things, and sometimes they might get in trouble at school, or we have an issue with a parent coming over and said, this kid said this, or, life happens, right? And what happens is I could, very natural man, react and say, oh, all the things that we do as parents in our worst moments. I could yell, I could swear, I could spank, I could, turn into bad dad, right? Well, if I live and respond, live and evaluate and ask myself with Law of 1%, how am I doing with this value? Am I being patient? Am I recognizing? Am I praising? Am I spending time with them? And so it will encourage me to act in a positive way according to my values rather than react in a negative way. So I would love comments for just a brief moment. Anybody want to comment on what they're thinking right now about this? I know a couple of you have something probably to say. Please.
I have something to say.
Thanks, Jen.
So I know when I was raising my family, I always had this statement that that which is noticed tends to be repeated. Mm-hmm. And I followed that a lot because I felt like, oh, that's a really positive, a way to really notice the positive, and then generally that's what would be repeated. And I think this goes along well with this because as we're noticing and bringing out the positive in others, and it becomes a way of life for everybody.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, Jen, if you notice that your son or daughter did say please or thank you or made their bed and you praise them for it, they're more inclined to say please and thank you and make their bed and be kind, and the list could go on because yes, you're positive. That's excellent. Yes. Okay, other comments? Thank you. That was perfect. Anybody else? I think Brother Christensen in the book talked about the fact that he came home and he could see like maybe they spilled popcorn all over the room. And it could be like, react. Now, this is very Stephen Covey-esque. Stephen Covey talked about, in his 7 Habits, the value of being proactive. And this really goes along with it. So I'm just going to share this with you briefly. We have stimulus and we have response. And very often we respond quickly and natural man ways that are not great. Well, what he teaches us is we try to want to make a gap. Consciously, don't automatically respond. And ask yourself, be aware, use your imagination, think about what you're thinking with your conscience and your independent will, and make a proactive reaction rather than a natural reaction. So I wanted to just share this statement, and I think this is, to me, if I could sum up in just a few words why this class can make a difference in your life, it is this. When we pay attention, and that's taking time to pay attention with the Law of 1% to those things that matter, those things we care about most, values, the law of entropy has no force, and we practice the art of progressive living. And most of us, we get sucked into the whirlwind of day-to-day life. It's busy. We have a lot on our plate. We have stresses. We have challenges. And we don't take time to be with our values. So here is a little story I want to share. I'm going to share just a couple more things, and then we'll wrap up. This was from this assignment a couple of years ago, I think. But I think it's an example. This week you're going to talk about what would you do with your law of 1% time. And I've read a few: read your scriptures, meditate, review your goals. Here is one that I just really like, so I'm going to share it with you. Tyler said, for 15 minutes every day, I'd like to focus on my family and visualize how to be a happy family and make those visions a reality through diligent hard work. An example of this: I woke up around 5, that'd be 5 a.m. to feed my daughter, and normally put the TV on to wake me up. But today I sat down and started feeding her, and the TV remote was visible but clearly out of reach. And I was too tired to get up and get it, which ended up being a great thing. So I didn't turn it on and just focused my attention on my daughter and the miracle she is for the time she was eating. I thought about the sacred responsibility I had as her father and had a spiritual experience at 5 in the morning with something as simple as feeding my daughter. This all happened because I didn't turn on something that isn't important and rather focus on what is important to me, my family. So I just thought that was a good one. Now, this is a lot more words than you're going to want to read. I'm going to actually attach this, or I might just include a link to this story. So this is getting back to the balance topic really quickly. This is something that I shared with my 3 children who went on missions. My wife and I talk about it often. We call it the Sigmund Wohlman reality test. Has anybody seen this before, or is this new? Anybody? So I'm going to summarize it, and I'm going to read the end, okay? This actually came out in 1960. That's a long time ago. That was the year I was born, in Reader's Digest. And this has been circulated a lot. You can Google it. People have made videos of it, but it's a really good reminder of having a balanced approach to how we respond to life. And the gentleman that wrote this article, his name was Robert Fulghum, and he talks about the fact that he had a job working at a resort in the Sierra Nevada. I'm picturing above LA, or northern, somewhere in California. And his job, he had multiple jobs, but this was a Swiss-German resort. His job was to take care of the horses and just odd jobs at the hotel. And the problem with this was every day he and everybody else who was working on that night crew was fed the same thing: wieners, a mountain of sauerkraut, and stale rolls. And he just, every night, that's what they got fed. And one night he said, I'm sick of this. And so he bumps into Sigmund Wohlman, who's the night bookkeeper, the night auditor. And he just starts cursing and swearing and I think throwing stuff around. And he just, if he says here for 20 minutes, he's just throwing a royal fit about sick and tired of eating the same thing. They deduct it from my paycheck. It's un-American, blah, blah, blah. Well, Sigmund Wohlman, who is an older gentleman, a survivor of Auschwitz, a German, a Jew, was the only person that's listening to this, he calls a war cry. And this is what he says to me. He says to Robert, he says, listen, Fulghum, listen me. You know what's wrong with you? It's not the wieners and kraut. It's not the boss. It's not the chef. It's not the job. Fulghum says, so what's wrong with me? He says, Fulghum, you think you know everything, but you don't know the difference between an inconvenience and a problem. If you break your neck, this is hidden. If you have nothing to eat, if your house is on fire, then you got a problem. Everything else is inconvenient. He says, life is lumpy. Learn to separate the inconveniences from the real problems. You will live longer and you will not annoy people like me so much. Good night. And then he waves him off to bed. And then what Fulghum says is, he says, seldom in his life has he been hit with such a reality. There in the late night darknesses of a Sierra Nevada inn, Sigmund Wohlman simultaneously kicked his butt and opened up his mind. And so he says, for 30 years now, in times of stress and strain, when something has me backed against the wall and I'm ready to do something really stupid, he pictures Sigmund saying, problem or inconvenience? And he thinks of that as the Sigmund Wohlman reality test. Life is lumpy, and a lump in the oatmeal and a lump in your throat and a lump in your breast are not the same lump. So that's just a little reminder. And one of the things that you can do if you want to put this to the next level is you can actually kind of chart your things out. So if any of us, the 26 of us or 25 of us that are in this meeting, if you were to get the absolute worst news today, what would that be? You can type in chat or unmute your mic. What would be the worst news that you could get today? Usually the answers are pretty similar to this question. Absolute worst news. Loved one passed away, typically the first response. Thank you, Kelsey. Anybody else? Okay, so that's it. Death of a loved one. Okay. What would be something like in the middle? Bad news, not horrible news. Anything? Lost a job, failed a test, lost a job. 2 of those. Yeah, thank you. From Jen and from Ronnie. Joshua, thank you for that. Okay. Oh, I'm doing this backwards. This is an annoyance. Roommate drinks my milk. Okay. And then car breaks down, perhaps. So what would be on the left hand of this table, what would be a typical, what would be an like expected response for death of a loved one? Well, you should be devastated, crushed. Most of us have had this. We lost a baby. My brother died of brain cancer. Those are hard things. They take time to get over. Your car breaks down, you should be pretty dang ticked off, right? It might be a few $100 out of your pocket, maybe money that you don't have, and inconvenience. And your roommate drinks your milk, it's a minor annoyance. But sometimes we act like we're pretty dang ticked off, right? Roommate drinks milk, I act like my car broke down, okay? This is an inconvenient at the bottom. The middle one, that's a more problem-y, right? The top one is a problem. So we just think about, how we would respond to those things. So I'm going to end with a poem, and then we're going to see if you have any questions. And then next week, we get back to building personal creed document. This was a poem that was written in 1916 by Ella Wheeler. And I am not what's the right term? I am not an orator where I'm going to make this sound beautiful, but I want to read through it because I think it's good. But she says, but to every mind there openeth a way and a way and a way. A high soul climbs the highway, and the low soul gropes the low. And in between on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. But to every man there openeth a highway and a low, and every mind decideth the way his soul shall go. One ship sails east, and another west. By the selfsame winds that blow, 'tis the set of the sails, and not the gales, that tells the way we go. Like the winds of the sea are the waves of time as we journey along through life. 'Tis the set of the soul that determines the goal and not the calm or the strife. So I think that's a good reminder, the value of positive vision, positive attitude, positive self-talk, being proactive with living by our values, and we'll do and be better. So this week, we have again, no personal creed document this week. Next week, we're going to build your personal creed document. Now, the next 2 times, I know some of you are like on it, right? You can start like Friday of this next week to do lesson number 10 will be on. And you're going to hop onto it and you're going to build your personal creed document number 4 like right now. And you'll have good instructions in the book and good instructions in the Canvas class. The next 2 weeks, I would recommend waiting until our class meeting before you launch and build PCD number. Now, this is still draft. In about 4 weeks, you'll hand in your final. But I noticed that a lot of people, they don't do it incorrectly, but there's a better way of writing value statements. So we're going to spend some time. I'll plan the meeting early next week, no later than Tuesday. And you can go ahead and build it out. And if you submit it, no harm done. But I would like to teach you how to write a great value statement. The week after that, we're going to do goals. And most people jump on goals and they do it and they end up doing it incorrectly. So my recommendation in the next 2 weeks, hold off on the final packaging of Personal Creed Document 4 and the final packaging of Personal Creed Document 5 so that we can have it be the best it can be. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I will stay on after I close this recording to see if anybody does, and then we will be back at it next week. Thank you, and we'll talk to you later.